Is that it? Hi, everybody. My name's Clardy. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date's July 22nd, 1995. My goodness, it looks like I'm coming up on 29 years. Not sure how that happened. I have a lot of gratitude in my life today. And whenever I'm asked to tell my story, I'm grateful for that. It's not always pleasant to revisit some of those dark times in my life, but I think it's healthy for me to do that. And how I got through all of those things that happened early in life for me and arrived at where I am today, where I have some peace and contentment and all the aches and pains of somebody my age, but basically I've got a good life today. And to think what the journey's been like has just been amazing. I'd like to start out by just giving a little background about growing up and what it was like for me. And I don't want to go too much into a drunkalogue. One of the main things I want to focus on tonight is spirituality, which is a huge part of this program for me. One of the most difficult parts I had to deal with. But I grew up in a relatively normal family. Mom, dad, brother, sister. None of those were alcoholics, but there was a lot of alcoholism in the rest of my family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, many very bad alcoholics, a number of which died some pretty ugly alcoholic deaths. I remember my very first drink that I had with my brother, although he doesn't remember it. It's funny the things that alcoholics remember. But anyway, we were having lunch one day, and my father left a little bit of beer in the bottom of a Pabst Blue Ribbon can. And I cleaned the table and made away with that little bit of beer in the bottom of the can. And by the time my brother and I snuck off to see what it tastes like, the beer was warm, and I took a taste and I said, "Man, that's really good. I want some more." My brother tasted it and he spit it out. He didn't like it at all. And when I think back about my propensity to like alcohol and to become an alcoholic, I do believe that I inherited some sort of genes in my family. And when I started having a lot of difficulty and trouble with drinking, I thought more about that, and I managed to manufacture a resentment against God for giving me those genes, which ended up causing me to be an alcoholic, or so I think. But I had a relatively normal high school time. I drank like everybody else did. Played athletics in high school. That was okay. My drinking and drugging really took off when I went to college, and I managed to get through part of that. And when I graduated, I went back to the family business in Myrtle Beach, and my brother had just gotten out of the Army, and the business wasn't big enough to support all three of us. So I said to my brother, "Teddy, you go ahead and help Dad run the family business, and I'll go out on my own and do something else." And so at that point, I was kind of free. And for the next probably 3 or 4 years, I think it may have been, I was really on a spree, drinking, drugging, doing whatever I pleased to do. I moved around the country a lot. I really didn't have a goal in life at that point, other than I wanted to be hip, slick, and cool, and that was my focus on life. That's what I wanted to be. That was my life's ambition, and I didn't seem to have a problem with that. I think a lot these days about alcoholic insanity and what that was like for me during my drinking years, and even in early sobriety, and some of the things that went through my mind that I thought was okay, when it really wasn't, but I was okay with it. Anyway, I finally ended up moving back to Myrtle Beach. I met a girl, ended up getting married, and for the next decade, I was what I would call living a life of a controlled alcoholic. I had a good job. I moved to Texas, and things were going pretty well for me, although my drinking was increasing as time went on. And somewhere along the line, I manufactured in my mind this feeling of impending doom. I knew I drank too much. Drugs sort of faded out of my life, but I didn't know where it was all going to end. I never really tried to stop drinking. I was just taking it as it came. And as my drinking increased, I realized that I needed to do something about it, but I had no concept of what it was like to get sober, and wasn't sure what I was going to do. I started having thoughts of suicide if things got bad enough, and I came up with a 3-point plan for me. This was my life goal at that point, and the top thing on my list when it got bad enough, I was just going to shoot myself, and I had this elaborate plan to be able to do that. If that didn't work, I was just going to keep on drinking. That was the next step. And way down the list was to stop drinking if I could, but that was way down the line. Had some success. I was living in Houston, had a nice house, married, condo at Myrtle Beach, money in the bank. Wife was doing well. Everything was great. And that feeling of impending doom was still with me and started to grow and grow and grow. And I felt like that one day everything was going to come crashing down. And I had no idea what that was. But that was really the beginning of my bottom when that happened. And, I'd had a very successful year at work. The company sent me out to Lake Tahoe with some other folks on a trip, a thank you trip. I jumped ahead a little bit. Let me back up. So anyway, I was in Houston, and when I was asked to give a talk at a business conference we had, and I was up speaking, giving this presentation, and this notion of impending doom, for some strange reason, started to creep into my mind. And I thought to myself, oh no, I hope that's not starting to happen. And the more I thought about it, I started losing my train of thought. I was stumbling over my words. And I realized that curtain was coming down. And all that impending doom that I had for all those years came crashing down that day. I froze at the podium. I couldn't say a word. I picked up my briefcase. I left. And I went home, and I was going to initiate my number one plan on my 3-point plan and that was to get a gun and shoot myself. I figured I had really come to my bottom. And when I got the gun to my head and heard the hammer click back, I realized I didn't have the guts to do it. And I was really angry at myself because my exit strategy was not going to work. And I didn't know what I was going to do then. So I came up with this other plan. I was going to resign my job, leave my house, and move back to Florida. And that's what I did. I was upside down in my house in Houston, but I didn't let that keep me from doing what I wanted to do, which was to sit on the beach and drink beer. I had equity from 2 other houses in that one. Had some money in the bank. Told my wife we were leaving, so we packed up and moved. I called the mortgage company on the drive to Florida and said, I have moved out. I'm not paying anymore. Do whatever you want. And that was the best alcoholic thinking I could come up with. When we got to Florida, we moved into a little apartment, and my wife saw what was really happening, and she came and said that she wanted a divorce. And I think that was probably the final straw for me. I had spent all our savings, charged up all my credit cards, had no idea what I was going to do, but I was just lost. I was totally lost. And then one of these strange coincidences that we sometimes talk about in AA happened. And right directly across the street from this little apartment I was living in, there was a construction project going on. And lo and behold, it was a treatment center. And I thought, I wonder what goes on in there. And after my wife left, the only thing I had was an old beat up Toyota with a duffel bag in the back. And I thought to myself, how did this happen? What happened to my life? How did I get in this predicament? So one day I went over and spoke with the intake counselor at the treatment center, and they said, yes, you can probably benefit if you check in here. So I did. Spend 28 days in the treatment center. Didn't much like what I saw there, what I heard there. When I first started to hear about the steps, I really didn't like those, didn't want to have much to do with them. Spirituality, wasn't going to work for me. I grew up in a Christian home, but what I knew of Christianity wasn't going to help me with my drinking problem, I didn't think. So I didn't know what I was going to do. And, it was suggested when I was in rehab that I get on my knees and pray. And I hadn't done that since I was a little boy. And I remember the first time I tried that, I got on my knees and I heard people say that they prayed to the doorknob, they prayed to the refrigerator. I said, it doesn't matter, just begin someplace. So I got on my knees and I looked out the window and I saw a palm tree and I prayed to a palm tree. And I thought to myself, how ridiculous is this? And I didn't realize until later that there was some significance to that. And I was down the sobriety path a little bit and it had some spirituality come into my life and I was doing okay. And somebody asked me, how did you get started on this spiritual journey? And I thought back to when I prayed to the palm tree and I realized that did have some meaning for me. And my journey continued. I did the 28 days. I went to a halfway house. I was pretty much lost. I didn't have any faith in my ability to stop drinking. And if I did, I couldn't imagine that how I would be able to have any kind of a life without alcohol. I felt like somebody put a corkscrew in the top of my head and pulled me out. I didn't know who I was. When I was drinking, my mantra was, I hate everything and everybody. I hate everything and everybody. And when I got sober, my mantra changed to, I'm afraid of everything and everybody. I'm afraid of everything and I had no self-confidence. I stayed in the halfway house until they kicked me out because I didn't or wouldn't get a job. I finally ended up getting a job in a used boats parts place in Fort Lauderdale. And I just didn't think I was going to be able to handle it. I was a lost soul. I was not able to grasp AA in a way that it was giving me any help at that point. I went to meetings. I got a sponsor. When it came to doing my fourth and fifth step the first time, I didn't want to do the fourth, but I managed to get some things written down. I certainly wasn't going to share it with anybody, but I knew I needed to. And I heard, I was going to the Fort Lauderdale men's group, and I heard all kinds of people come up with different ways to do their fifth step. And I heard a guy say something one time that I kind of liked the sound of. And he said he was going to go out and pick up a hitchhiker and do his fifth step with him. And when he was finished, he was going to drop him off. So I said, boy, that sounds like a good idea. And I didn't do that, but I did pick a guy at Fort Lauderdale men's group. The guy's name was Tomer, and Tomer was close to being wet brain, and he was the greeter for years at that meeting. And I asked Tomer if he would hear my fifth step, and he said he would. And we went out back and sat at the table, and I did it. And so that was that. And then I moved away from Fort Lauderdale, and I didn't see Tomer again for years until the International AA Convention in Atlanta. And I was in a breakout room in the back, and I heard somebody raise their hand, and the guy said, "My name is Tomer, and I'm an alcoholic." And I turned around and I looked, and I hadn't seen this guy in probably 20 years or something like that. And he was a new man. And I was on my way for recovery as well. It was a long, slow journey for me, but gradually I started to get some confidence back. I started to, my spirituality, I was connecting with that. I was working the steps. I actually went back to my old company that I had left when I was in Houston. And, I was starting to get my life back, and I was thrilled that was happening. And, I met another girl and got married again, and things were going well. I was going to meetings, working in West Palm Beach, and lo and behold, I was getting so important again that I really didn't have time to get to meetings like I should have or wanted to or felt like that I needed to. But I had another plan to keep from drinking. And this is more of that alcoholic insanity. And by that time I was coming up on 8 years sobriety. But my plan was that if I ever felt like I wanted to drink, if I ever felt like I was getting squirrely, if I ever spent too much time lingering in the wine aisle at Publix, I was going to hop right back into AA because I didn't want to drink again. And so this is when they sent me on a trip out to Lake Tahoe, and on the bus from the airport going to the casino, there were a bunch of guys up front drinking just like I used to drink in my final days, and they were slugging Jack Daniels straight out of the bottle, and that was my drink of choice. And I didn't feel like I wanted to join them. I didn't feel like I wanted to drink. I mean, why would I want to drink? My life was good. Everything was going fine. I had 8 years sober. And the only thing I was thinking that I was probably going to have to be doing some 12-step work with these guys that were drinking Jack Daniels straight out of the bottle. Before that night was over, I had picked up a drink. And I thought to myself, oh my God, how did that happen? And we were at this fancy dinner, and they poured some wine, which I wasn't going to drink. And I picked up the glass to have a toast for everybody. And I forget what page of the big book it's on, but the words are strange and incomprehensible blank spot. I think those are something like that. And the drink was there. I drank it. I didn't think about doing it. I didn't want to do it. I just did it. And I put that drink down on the table. And I thought to myself, oh my God, what have I done? And, I'd thrown away 8 years sobriety. And I thought that I was probably going to be drunk by the end of the night, maybe in jail, maybe laying in the gutter, drunk. But none of that happened. I went back to my hotel room, woke up the next morning, didn't get drunk, didn't have a hangover, and some more alcoholic thinking. And that was, maybe I can do this. Maybe I'm really not an alcoholic after all. I mean, after all, I didn't get drunk. And so I practiced some controlled drinking for a while. And it wasn't long before all the chaos and all the horrible things started to happen in my life once again. And the horrible depression, feeling of impending doom. I was suicidal again. I found myself once again sitting in the woods with a gun in my hand, and I was bound and determined to blow my brains out this time because I couldn't do it the first time, and I was bound and determined I was going to do it this time. I was at the end of my rope, and I couldn't do it. I went back to my home group in Jupiter and picked up a white chip and began the process all over again. And I started to think about what could I do differently the second time around. How did that happen to me? What can I miss? How can I get more involved in the program? What can I do differently? And a few things I discovered. One were the Joe and Charlie tapes. I hadn't heard about them before that. And I got deeply involved in those. I actually met Charlie permanently. I took 3 of my sponsees up to Titusville, Florida, and met him. He signed the front of my big book. I listened to those tapes for so long. I was standing in this room, and before the meetings began, and I heard that voice behind me. And I turned around, and here's this little guy in overalls with suspenders, and we had a nice chat. In addition to the Joe and Charlie tapes, I got into doing more service work, and I got into taking meetings in the county jails and federal prisons, and that was a big help for me. And with as bad as my relapse was, I never thought that there could be any upside to it. But in hindsight, I can see that there was, and it was difficult for me, but it gave me some experience with which to be able to help other people with that had relapse, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with it. And it was, it was a long, long journey for me to try to get back. But getting back in the program and working the steps and digging deeper and trying to figure out a way to get my life back has made a huge difference for me. There's some things that I've come to learn along the way, and one has to do with life is like being in a canoe with God, and we're up front paddling, and God is in the back steering the boat. And if we try to do his job, we get in trouble. If we stop paddling, our life is going nowhere. If we think we know how to steer, we may go into the rapids. And if we expect God to do our job, we have nothing. My spiritual journey has been quite amazing. Kind of early on, I had a spiritual experience which helped me a lot in early sobriety. I was had the opportunity to crew on a square rig, or something I always wanted to do my whole life. So I sailed from Fort Lauderdale down to the Virgin Islands, and I got off the ship and went over to St. John's, and I camped out in the woods for a week or so. And I would get up in the morning and walk down on the beach and sort of pray and meditate and ask for guidance and try to figure out what I could do to get my life back together. And this one morning, it was overcast and there was nobody on the beach. It was very early in the morning, just after sunrise. And I stopped and I started praying, and I put my head back and I put my hands out. And all of a sudden, when I'm praying, the clouds parted and a ray of sun came right down on me. And I felt like I had made some type of spiritual contact with my higher power. And that was very meaningful for me. I truly believe that we are spiritual beings having a temporary human experience. Another thing that I've come to deal with a lot is meditation, which they tried to get me to do in rehab, but I couldn't do it, didn't do it, thought it was a bunch of hogwash. But I finally grasped the idea of meditation and what it can do for me. And I read somewhere along the line that a very focused meditation would be to, well, let me back up a second. Of all human thought, they told me this in rehab, of all human thought, 80% of it is subconscious. So when we have a conscious thought, that previously was in our subconscious. And so if we wanted to have positive thoughts, we needed to feed positive things into our subconscious. And with all of human thought, which are, I guess, I don't know, thousands or tens of thousands a minute or an hour or whatever, it just goes from one thought to the next and the next to the next. And something that I'd learned to focus on was the gap between the thoughts. And I'd never thought of that before. But even though thoughts are close together, there's got to be a gap from when one thought ends and another thought begins. And so I tried to focus on being in that gap between thoughts. And hard to do, but to me, that's where our ego is not involved with our thinking at all. And I'm amazed at how I have come through the difficulty that I've had in my life, and that I have arrived at a place where I have some peace. And we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different bottoms, but the solution for us all is the same. In the steps with the program, it works if we work it. I'm grateful that I am where I am today. Somewhere along the line, somebody gave me a Bill W. plant that I believe when Bill Wilson passed away in 1971 in Miami Beach, somebody brought a Swedish ivy plant to his hospital room, and after he passed away, Lois took it and started making clippings and giving it to people. And I have some of those that I have here. I grow them and give them to other people, and that helps bring us all a little bit closer together. I think AA has become a family for me. Every time I share my story or hear somebody else's story, I feel a little bit closer to people, and I'm entirely grateful for that. So I guess that about wraps it up for me, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to share my story. Thank you.